So with this book here, don't get too stressed out about anything. These masters are, like I say, whenever you read their books, there's an energy that comes in. Whenever you say their name, something goes on. And when I read these books to you, they know I'm doing this. So whatever is going on in your life and things, these energies come through to help. And that's the whole idea, is connecting and wanting these things to come in. So I'm not sure if I'm going to get to part 2 today, but hopefully. So the master's activities. The master has a large garden of his own. He possesses to a quality of land and employ laborers to cultivate it. Near the house there are flowering shrubs and masses of flowers growing freely, with ferns among them. Through the garden there flows a streamlet, which forms a little waterfall, and over it a tiny bridge is built. Here he often sits when he is sending out streams of thoughts and dedications upon his people. It would no doubt appear to cause observers, or it would no doubt appear the causal observer, as though he were sitting idly watching nature and listening heedlessly to the songs of the birds and to push and the splashes and the tumbles of the water. Sometimes, too, he rests in his great armchair. When his people see him thus, they know that he must not be disturbed. They do not know exactly what he is doing, but suppose him to be samadhi. The fact that people in the East understand this kind of meditation, respect it, may be one of the reasons why the adepts prefer to live there rather than in the West. Because people are very intrusive in meditations and all kinds of things. In natives and all kinds of things, like when we're doing certain things with ceremonies, you see a person doing things, you respect them. And if you want to work with all this knowledge that I've shared you need to respect the teachers. If you're calling in Saint Germain and you're being asked and told to do something, do it. Don't say, oh, no, I don't want to do that. But people are really bad to do that on this continent. They have no respect. They go to people and they ask for things, and then they're told to do stuff, and then they don't do it. So respect is a big thing. So in this way, we get to affect the master sitting quietly for a considerable part of the day, and as we should say, meditating. But while he is apparently resting so calmly, he is in reality engaged all the time in most strenuous labor on higher planes, manipulating various natural forces and pouring forth influences of the most desired characters on thousands of souls simultaneously. And that's what these masters do. People are always wanting, and they're always sending stuff. And they got to go into altered states to do these things. For the adepts are the busiest people in the world. The master, however, does much physical plane work as well. He has composed some music and has written notes and papers for various purposes. He is also much interested in the growth of physical science, although this is especially the province of one of the other great masters of wisdom. For from time to time the master Kenthumi rides on a big bay horse, and occasionally when their work lies together, he is accompanied by Master Moira, who always rides a magnificent white horse. Our masters gradually visit some of the monasteries, and sometimes goes up the great pass to a lonely monastery in the hill. Riding in the course of his duty seems to be his principal exercise, but he sometimes walks with the Master Dejwal Cole, who lives in a little cabin which he built with his own hands, quite near the great crag, on the way up to the plateau. Sometimes our masters play on organs, which is in the large room in his house. He had it made in Tibet under his direction, and it is in fact combined piano and organ, with a keyboard like those which we have in the West, on which he can play all our Western music. It is unlike any other instrument with which I am acquainted, for it is a sense double fronted, and it can be played either from the sitting room or the library. The principal keyboard, or rather the three keyboard great organ, swells and choir in the sitting room, whereas the piano keyboard is in the library. These keyboards can be used either together or separately. The full organ with its pedals can be played in the original way from the sitting room, but by turning the handle somewhat equivalent to a stop. The piano mechanisms can be linked with the organ so that all play simultaneously. From the point of view in front of the piano is treated as an additional spot on the organ. From the keyboard and library, however, the piano can be played alone as a separate instrument, quite disassociated from the organ, but by some complicated mechanisms, and choir or organ is also linked to the keyboard, so that by it one can play the piano alone precisely as though it were the original piano, or one can play the piano accompanied by the choir organ, or any rate by certain stops of that organ. It is possible, as I said, to separate the two completely, and so with the performer at each keyboard to play the piano organ duet. The mechanisms and the pipes of the strange instrument occupy almost the whole of what might be called the upper story of this part of the master's house. By magnetization, he has placed it in communication with the Gandharvas, or divas of music, so that whenever it is played, they cooperate, and thus he obtains combinations of sounds never to be heard on the physical plane. And there is too an effect produced by the organ itself as an accompaniment of string and wind instrument. The song of the divas is ever being sung in the world. It is ever sounding in man's ear, but they will not listen to its beauty. There is a deep brudging of the sea, and the sighing of the wind in the trees, a roar of the mountain torrents, the music of the streams, the rivers, and the waterfalls, which together with many other forms the mighty song of nature as she lives. This is but the echo of the physical world, of the far grander sound, that of the being of the divas, as it is said in Light on the Path. Only fragments of the great song come to your ears while yet you are but man. But if you listen to it, remember it faithfully, so that none which has reached you is lost, and endeavor to learn from it and the meaning of the mysteries which surround you. In time you will need no teacher, for as the individual has voice, so has that in which the individual exists. Life itself has speech, and is never silence, and its utterance is not as that our deaf may suppose to cry. It is a song. Learn from it that you are part of the harmony. Learn from it to obey the law of the harmony. Every morning a number of people, not exactly pupils, but followers, come to the master's house and sit on the veranda and outside it. Sometimes he gives them a little talk, a sort of a lecture, but more often he goes on with his work and takes no notice of them beyond his friendly smile, with which they seem equally content. They evidently come to sit in his aura and venerate him. Sometimes he takes his food in their presence, sitting on the veranda with a crowd of Tibetans and other on the ground around him, but generally he eats by himself at a table in his room. It is possible that he keeps the rule of the Buddhist monks and takes no food after noon, for I do not remember ever to have seen him eating in the evening. It is even possible that he does not need food every day. Most probably, when he feels inclined, he orders that food that he would like and does not take his meal at stated times. I have seen him eating little round cakes, brown sweets. They are made of wheat, sugar, and butter, and are of ordinary kind used in the household cooked by his sister. He also eats curry and rice, the curry being somewhat in a form of soup, like a dal. He uses a curious and beautiful golden spoon with an exquisite image of an elephant at the end of the handle, a bowl of which is set at an unusual angle to the stem. It is a family heirloom, very old and probably of great value. He generally wears white clothes, but I do not remember ever having seen him wearing a headdress of any kind, except on rare occasions when he assumes the yellow robe of the Galapa sect or clan, which includes a hood somewhat of the shape of a Roman helmet. The Master Moira, however, generally wears a turban. So they're trying to give you an idea where these masters live and the things that go on there. But there's a lot of things. And like when you go into a Sufi temple, a lot of people go there to sit in the Sufi master's aura. And a real Sufi, you will go in there and he might sit for days. He'll come in the morning and he'll sit and he'll go in a meditative state and he'll sit there and he won't say anything. It's just generating energy out, and people will go and sit in his aura. And while sitting in it, they get healed. All kinds of things go on. And a lot of people, when they come in my energy, it makes them feel so good. And like I say, this is from the universe. And there's this energy that comes off me. I don't command it. I don't tell it what to do. So the other houses, the house of Master Mora is on the opposite side of the valley, which is much lower down, quite close, in fact, to a little temple and entrance to the cave. It is so entirely different style of architecture, having at least 2 stories. The front facing the road has a veranda, each level, which are almost entirely glassed in. The general method and agreement of his life is much the same as that already described in the case of Master Kathumi. If we walk up the road on the left bank of the stream, raising gradually along the side of the valley, we pass on the right of the house and grounds of the Master Kathumi. Further up the hill, we will find on the same side of the road a small hut or cabin which he who is now the Master Dajwal constructed himself with his own hands in the days of his pupilage, in order that he might have the abiding place quite near to his master. In that cabin hangs a sort of plaque upon which, at his request, one of the English pupils of the Master Kathumi precipitated many years ago an interior view of the large room in the house of the Master Kathumi, showing the figure of various masters and pupils. This was done in commemoration of certain especially happy and fruitful evenings at the Master's house. The first ray Adepts. So yesterday it talked about masters who are very, very old, who have figured out how to prolong their life and live really long, and these are some of those masters. And they're on the earth and people can go to them and learn and grow. So this is where this book, I think there's things in here that maybe can help people understand, and they're real. Turning now to considerations of personal appearance of the great ones, that is modified to some extent by the ray types of which each of them belong. The first ray has powers for it as almost prominent characteristics, and those who are born upon it are the kings, the rulers, and the governors of the world, of the inner and spiritual world in the first place, but also of the physical plane. Any man who possesses in a very unusual degree the qualities which enable him to dominate men and to guide them smoothly along the course which he desires is likely to be either a first-rate man or one who is tending towards the first ray. So if you're not already a first ray, then you're working to become that. Such a kingly figure is the Lord Visvata Manu, the ruler of the fifth root race, who is the tallest of all adepts, being 6'8" in height and perfectly proportioned. He is a representative man of our race. Its prototype, and every member of that race is directly descended from him. The Manu has a very striking face of great power, with an eloquent nose, a full and flowing brown beard, brown eyes, and a magnificent head of leonine poise. Tall he is, says our president, and of king-like majesty, with eyes piercing as an eagle, tawny and bright with golden lights. He is living at present in the Himalayan mountains, not far from the house of the great brother, the Lord Maitreya. Such a figure also is Master Moya, the lieutenant and successor of the Lord Vishvadi Manu, the future Manu of the sixth race. He is a Rajput king by birth, has a dark beard divided into two parts, dark almost black, hair falling on one shoulder, and dark and piercing eyes full of power. He is 6'6" in height, and bears himself like a soldier, speaking in short, terse sentences as if he were accustomed to being instantly obeyed. In his presence there is a sense of overwhelming power and strength. He has an imperial dignity that compels the deepest reverence. Madame Blavatsky has often told us how she met with Master Mora in Hyde Park in London in the year 1851, when he came over with a number of other Indian princes to attend the first great international exhibition. Strangely enough, I myself, then a little child of 4, saw him also, all unknowingly. I can remember being taken to see this gorgeous procession in which, among many other wonders came to the party, and richly dressed Indian horsemen. Magnificent horsemen they were, riding steeds of as fine, I suppose, as any in the world. It was only natural that my childish eyes were fixed upon them in great delight, and that they were perhaps to me the finest exhibition of the marvelous and fairly liked show. And even as I watched them pass, as I stood holding my father's hand, one of the tallest of those heroes fixed me with a gleaming black eyes, which half frightened me, and yet at the same time filled me with an indescribable happiness and exultation. He passed with the others, and I saw him no more, yet often the vision of his flashing eyes returned to my childish memory. Of course, I knew nothing then of who he was, and I should never have identified him, had it not been for a gracious remark which he made to me many years afterwards. Speaking one day in his presence of the early days of the society, I happened to say that the first time I had had the privilege of seeing him in materialized form was at a certain occasion when he came into Madame Blavatsky's room in Adar for the purpose of giving her strength and issuing certain directions. He himself, who was engaged in conversation with some adepts, turned sharply upon me and said, "No, that was not the first time. You had seen me before then in my physical body, do you not remember, as a tiny child, watching the Indian horsemen ride past in Hyde Park, and did you not see how even then I singled you out?" I remembered instantly, of course, and said, "Oh, master, was that you? But I ought to have known it. I do not mention this incident among the occasions when I have met and spoke with a master, both parties at the interview being in the physical body, because I do not at the time know the great horseman to be the master, and because the evidence of so small a child might well be doubted or discounted. And this is where sometimes you cross these teachers and these paths and things, and they stand out. Hey, Sue Gehrig, good morning. So M.S. Ramaswamy era is an account of the experience mentioned in the chapter I write. And I've spoken about coming across these beings here and there where they would be in crowds and I'd spot them. And I'd know it because they're so different, their energy and everything. And sometimes they'd look at me and you'd feel this energy. And then when you look back, they're not there. It's really, really amazing when they allow you to see them in crowds and other things because they check on you. And it's really, really amazing when they allow you to know that. I was following the road to town, whence I was assured by people I met on the road I could cross over to Tibet easily in my pilgrim's garb, when I suddenly saw a solitary horseman galloping towards me from the opposite direction. From all tall stature and still in horsemanship, I thought he was some military officer from Sikkim Raj. As he approached me, he reined up. I looked at and recognized him instantly. I was in an awful presence of him, and the same Mahatma, my own revered guru, whom I had seen before in his astral body on the balcony of the Theosophical headquarters. It was he, the Himalayan brother of the ever memorable night in December last, who had so kindly dropped a letter in answer to one I had given but an hour or so before in a sealed envelope to Madame Blavatsky, whom I had never lost sight of for one moment during the interval. The very same instant saw me prostrate on the ground at his feet. I rose at his command, and leisured looking into his face, forgot myself entirely in the contemplation of the image. I knew so well, having seen his portrait, the Colonel Olcott's possession, time out of number. I knew not what to say. Joy or reverence tied my tongue. The majesty of his countenance, which seems to me to be the impersonation of power and thought, held me wrapped in awe. I was at last face to face with him, Mahatma of the Himavat, and he was no myth, no creation of the imagination of a medium, as some skeptics had suggested. It was no dream of the night. It was between 9 and 10 o'clock in the forenoon. There was the sun shining, and silently witnessing the scene from above, I saw him before me in flesh and blood. He speaks to me in accents of kindness and gentleness. What more could I want? My excess of happiness made me dumb. Nor was it until some time had elapsed that I was able to utter the few words, encouraged by his gentle tone of speech. His complexion is not fair as that of the Mahatma Kathumi, but never had I seen a countenance so handsome, a stature so tall and so majestic. As in the portrait, he wears a short black beard and locked black hair hanging down to his breast. Only his dress was different. Instead of white loose robes, he wore yellow mantle linen with fur, and on his head, instead of a turban, a yellow Tibetan felt cap, such as I have seen some Bhutanists wear in the countries. When the first moment of rapture and surprise were over, I calmly comprehended the situation. Had long talked with him. 5 years of theosophy, and so I think there's a reference to it in 5 Years of Theosophy, second edition, page 284. Another such regal figure of Lord Kushusha Manu, the Manu of the fourth root race, who is Chinese by birth and very high caste. He has the high Mongolian cheekbones, and his face looks as though it were diligently carved from old ivory. He generally wears magnificent robes of flowing cloth of gold. As a rule, we do not come into contact with him in our regular work, except when it happens that we have to deal with a pupil belonging to his root race. The second ray adepts. And like I say, you can call on these teachers. You don't know if you're connected to them, but you can try to call on them and see if they come and they help you. Second ray adept is in the personal or in person the Lord of the Bohovista, the world teachers, and of the Master Kathumi. His principal lieutenant, the influence that is especially noticeable is the radiance of their all-embracing love. The Lord Maitreya is wearing the body of the Celtic race as the present time, though when he comes forth to the world to teach his people, as he intends to do very shortly, so you got to remember, Kathumi will come and teach. He is a face of wondrous beauty, strong and yet most tender, with rich hair flowing like red gold about his shoulders. His beard is pointed, as in some of the old pictures of his, and his eyes of wonderful violet are like twin flowers, like stars, like deep and holy pools filled with water of everlasting peace. His smile is dazzling beyond words, and blinding glory of light surrounds him, intermingled with the marvelous rose-colored glow which ever shines from the Lord's love. We may think of him as seated in a great front room of his house in the Himalayas, the room with many windows that overlooks the gardens and the terraces, and far below the rolling Indian plains, or in flowing robes of white, edged with deep borders of gold, as walking in his garden in the cool of the evening among the glorious flowers, whose perfume fills the surrounding air with a rich, sweet fragrance. Wondrous beyond measure is the Holy Lord, the Christ, wondrous beyond any power of description, for through him flows the love which comforts millions, and his is the voice that speaks as never man spake, the words of teaching that brings peace to angels and to men. Within very few years that voice will be heard, and the love be felt by those who dwell in the dark way of the earth. May we prepare ourselves to receive him when he comes, and give him fitting welcome and faithful service. The Master Kathumi wears the body of a Kashmir Brahma and is as fair in complexion as the average Englishman. He too has flowing hair, and his eyes are blue, full of joy and love. His hair and beard are brown, which as sunlight catches it becomes ruby or ruddy with glints of gold. His face is somewhat hard to describe, for his expression is very changing as he smiles, and his nose is finely chiseled, and the eyes are large and so wonderful liquid, blue like the great Lord. He too is the teacher of the priest, and many centuries hence he will succeed him in his high office, and will assume the scepter of the world teacher and become the Bohovista of the sixth root race. So we're ready to move into the sixth root race. People think we're just going into the fourth, but we're going into the sixth. And these teachers will appear. They will be helping to change this world. The other rays, the Maha Kohan of the type of the statements of great organizers. Though he too has many military qualities, he wears an Indian body and is tall, thin, with sharp profile, very fine and clear cut. No hair on his face. His face is rather stern with a strong, square chin. His eyes are deep and penetrating, and he speaks somewhat abruptly, as a soldier speaks. He generally wears Indian robes and white turbans. The master of Count de Saint Germain resembles him in many ways. Though he is not especially tall, he is very upright and military in his bearing, and he has exquisite courtesy and dignity of a grand seigneur, or whatever that is, of the 18th century. We feel at once that he belongs to a very old and noble family. His eyes are large, brown, and are filled with tenderness and humor, though there is in them a glint of power, and the splendor of his presence impels men to make uh, obedience. His face is olive tanned, his eyes cut brown, hair is parted in the center and brushed back from the forehead, and he has a short and pointed beard. Often he wears dark uniforms with facings of gold lace, often also a magnificent red military coat, and then accentuated his shoulders-like appearance. He usually resides in the ancient castle in Europe, Eastern Europe, that has belonged to his family for many centuries. Master Serapis is tall, fair, and in complexion. He is Greek by birth, although all his work has been done in Egypt and in connection with the Egyptian lodge. He is very distinguished and aesthetic in face, somewhat resembles the late Cardinal Newman. Perhaps the Venetian Kohan is the handsomest of all the members of the Brotherhood. He is very tall, about 6 feet 5 inches, has a flowing beard and golden hair, somewhat like those of the Manu. His eyes are blue, although he was born in Venice. His family undoubtedly has Gothic blood in its veins, for he is a man distinctly of that type. The Master Hilarion is Greek, and except that he has a slightly aquiline nose, is ancient Greek type. His forehead is low and broad and resembles that of Hermes of Paxteles, Parxiteles. He too is wonderfully handsome and looks rather younger than most of the adepts. He who was once the disciple Jesus is now wearing a Syrian body. He has dark skin, dark eyes, black beard of an Arab, and generally wears white robes and a turban. He is the master of devotion, and the keynote of his presence is an instant purity, a fury type of devotion that brooks no obstacles. He lives among the Druze of Mount Lebanon. Two of the great ones with whom we have come into contact diverge slightly from what perhaps we may call, with all reverence, the usual type of physical body of the adept. One of these is the spiritual regent of India, he of whom Connell Alcott several times writes, to whom the name Jupiter was assigned in the book of man, whence, how, and why, whither. So that's a book, whence, how, and whither. He is shorter than most members of the Brotherhood and is the only one of them, so as far as I'm aware, whose hair shows streaks of gray. He holds himself very upright and moves with alertness and military precision. He is a landed proprietor, and during the visit which I paid to him with Swami T. Sabha Rao, I saw him several times transacting businesses with men whom appeared to be foremen, bringing reports to him and receiving instructions. The other is the Master Dajwal Kaul, who is still wearing the same body in which he attained adeptship only a few years ago. Perhaps for that reason it has not been possible to make that body a perfect reproduction of the Agioides, Augoeides. His face is distinctly Tibetan in character, with high cheekbones, and is somewhat rugged in appearance, showing signs of age. Sometimes an adept for some special purpose wants a body to use temporarily amid the bustle of the world. That will be the case when the world teachers come. We have been told that several other adepts also may then appear to act as his lieutenant and assist him in the great work for humanity. Most of these great ones will follow the example of their chief and borrow temporarily the bodies of their pupils. So it is necessary that a certain number of such vehicles should be ready for their use. Students sometimes ask why, since the adepts have physical bodies already. They will need others on this occasion. So that's really, really interesting and cool, isn't it? What do you think about that? You think that's exciting? Just about chapter 2 here. So I'm going to read the perfect physical vehicle, the borrowed vehicle, and then I'll start chapter 2 after I finish my break. So the perfect physical vehicles. Those who attaining the level of adept should choose as their future career to remain upon the world to help directly in the evolution of their own humanity, find it convenient for their work to retain physical bodies in order to be suitable for their purpose. These bodies must be of no ordinary kind. Not only must they be absolutely sound in health, but they also must be perfect expressions of as much of the ego as can be manifest on the physical plane. So, maybe they want really, really big ears, because the ego might want really big flappy ears, or might want a big giant nose, or big, one eyebrow, because the ego likes having things. And when it creates the body, it wants certain kinds of things. It might be really short, might be really tall, might be really muscular, but the ego has a say in things. Very cool, Tracy. You can see with the descriptions. Yes, that's important. And like having this knowledge, calling on them, they may appear somewhere and you might spot them. They might show themselves to you. That's why it doesn't hurt. And the more you learn and understand these things, and I've had experiences, strange experiences in my life, and they made it happen. And I've never forgot it. It's still that energy and everything's inside me. Like how that guy said he was a little boy and this horse parading by, and he looked at this one guy and he never forgot it. It imprints in you. There's an energy. And if you go through your life, you might have those that you cross somewhere that was really, really strange. But it's so strong, it's like you could be right there in the moment, in that place and everything, and that's going on. So you got to understand the ego, and don't try to get rid of your ego. Don't fight it. Don't teach that. Don't ever tell somebody that. I get really pissed off when I hear people trying to tell somebody to get rid of their ego. Not only must they be absolutely sound in health, but they must also be perfect expressions of as much of the ego as can be manifest in the physical plane. The building up of such a body as this is no light task. When the ego of an ordinary man comes down to his new baby body, he finds it in charge of an artificial element which has been created according to his karma, as I have described in the inner life. The elemental is industriously occupied in modeling the form which is soon to be born in the outer world, and it remains after birth. And that's why mothers, all of a sudden, they'll start having cravings and all kinds of stuff, because as they're eating, the body is going to form when the person's grown full. Like the hair they're going to have, the eyes are going to have, the skin, the bone structure and everything, and the mother is not in control. And all she knows, she needs to do this, and she can't stop. She's just going to do it. Even if she doesn't like certain food, she's going to end up eating it. And this is where you got to understand and stop fighting the ego. I don't like people who talk about ego and have no idea what it is. And people go around and talk all kinds of stuff. And you have to love your ego. You got to love your child spirit. You got to love your higher soul. You got to love everything. And it's really important to understand that because it'll teach you. It'll help you understand all kinds of stuff. And there's really lots of bad teachers out there. You got to be really careful of this stuff. After the birth and continues molding process, usually until the body is 6 or 7 years old. And so that is going on. So by the time you're 7, as you grow to become an adult, because you watch a face change, watch a child when they're born, watch how over the first 6, 7 years, how their bodies, their shoulders, everything, you'll see their nose and their structures, their eyes, their chins, everything will change, even the shape of their cheeks and that. And as they grow older, becoming teenager, you'll see them transform. It's amazing what the body does. During this period of ego is gradually acquiring closer contact with new vehicles, emotional and mental, as well as physical, and is becoming accustomed to them. But the actual work done by himself upon his new vehicle, upon the point at which the elemental withdraws, is, in most cases, inconsiderable. He is certainly in a connection with his body, but generally pays but little attention to it, preferring to wait until it has reached the stage where it is more responsive to his efforts. The case of an adept is very different from this, as there is no evil karma to be worked out. No artificial elemental is at work, and the ego himself is in sole charge of the development of the body from the beginning, finding himself limited only by his hereditary. So whatever your hereditary, lineage, your bloodline, there's certain things that are there that will play out too. This enables a far more refined and delicate instrument to be produced, but it is also evolves more trouble for the ego and engages for some years a considerable amount of time and energy. In consequence to this, and no doubt for other reasons as well, an adept does not wish to repeat the process more often than is strictly necessary, and he therefore makes his physical body last as long as possible. Our bodies grow old and die for various reasons, some inherited weaknesses, disease, accident, self-indulgence, worry, and overwork. But in the case of the adept, none of these causes is present. Though we must, of course, remember that his body is fit for work and capable to endure immeasurably beyond those of the ordinary man. And children being born, their bodies are designed to be like, there's all kinds of amazing things about children that are being born, and it's mind blowing. Like when you really understand this stuff, it's so beyond the body of the adept being such as we have described. They are usually able to hold possession of them much longer than an ordinary man can, and the consequences that we find on inquiry that the age of any such body is usually much greater than from the appearance which we suppose it to be. Master Mori, for example, appears to be a man absolutely in the prime of his life, possibly 35 or 40 years of age, yet many of the stories which his pupils tell of him assign to him an age 4 or 5 times greater than that. Madame Blavatsky told us that when she first saw him in her childhood, he appeared to be exactly the same at the present time. Again, the Master Kuthumi has the appearance of being about the same age as his constant friends and companions. Master Omoya yet has been said that he took a university degree in Europe just before the middle of last century, which would certainly make him something very like a centurion. We have at present no means of knowing what is the limits of prolongation, though there is evidence that shows that it may easily extend to more than double or 60 years, and 10 of this pomus or samas, Pgs S-A-L-M-I-S-T. The body thus made suitable for higher work is inevitably a sensitive one, and for the very reason it requires careful treatment if it is to be always at its best. It would wear out as ours did if it were subject to innumerable petty frictions of the outer world and its constant torrent of unsympathetic vibrations. Therefore, the great ones usually live in comparative seclusion and appear but rarely in the cyclone chaos which we call daily life. If they were to bring their bodies into the whirl of curiosity and vehement emotions which is likely to surround the world teachers when he comes, there can be no doubt that the life of the body would be greatly shortened. And also because their extreme sensitiveness, there would be much unnecessary suffering. That's why spiritual people have a really hard challenge, like me, being all kinds of places in all kinds of energy, being in psychic fairs and everything. It's like my sensitivity and everything. I don't try to shut it down. I try to stay grounded. I try to stay conscious. I try to stay aware. And I don't try to run away. I try to figure things out. And like I say, my body goes through really, really lots of crap. And when I was in Penticton, there was so much insane, dark, crazy stuff. Man, my body took a beating. Borrowed vehicles. By temporarily occupying the body of the pupil, the adept avoids these inconveniences, and at a time gives an incalculable impetus to the pupil's evolution. He inhabits the vehicle only when he needs it, to deliver a lecture perhaps, or to pour out a special flood of blessings, and as soon as he has done what he wishes, he steps out of the body. And this is where I said, I've seen people where they're standing there and they're telling me, oh yeah, I'm this and that, and they're saying they're a master. Oh, I'm going to do this and that in the spirit world. I'm up here watching, and I see my body, and they're standing there and they're going on about stuff. And then I see this angelic being come in, this person's soul pops out, the angelic being does all of this stuff, then steps out, and then the person's back in, and then they're like, see, I told you, this. And I'm like, you ain't doing nothing. But they're a vessel, and that's where, like I said, there's this one guy. He likes being really, really negative and dark. And he likes trying to do all kinds of things to people. But I see this being comes in, takes over him. And all of a sudden, he's this angelic, the most beautiful person you could find. And this guy can be really terrible when he wants to be. And so he would go in this altered state for hours and hours, and he would do all kinds of things for a person. The person would leave, and about 15 minutes, a half hour later, he'd pop back in, and he'd say, I did it, hey, Joe. I'm like, what? He's like, I did it, right? I'm like, yeah, you did everything perfect. And he would be like, really pissed off. He's like, what did I do? I'm like, don't worry, it was perfect. You did everything right. And he'd get really, really angry. But this is part of his contract on the planet. And every now and then the universe comes in, and they need to do this to help, and they bring people to him. And then they make all of this happen. I've seen it a lot of times. It's really, really interesting when it happens. And this is where spirits will come sometimes and speak through me and that. Sometimes people see me as a really, really ancient old Indian. Other people see me as Arabian and other kinds of things. Sometimes people really freak out. One person was sitting with me one time, and we were having this really cool discussion. And all of a sudden they started getting scared, and I'm like, what's going on? They said, I see you sitting there, but I see this really, really ancient face right here, and it's staring at me. And the eyes are really, really intense, and they're looking at me, and it's very ancient and old. And I says, don't worry about it. Just relax. And then we went on with things, and the person just calmed down, and then everything shifted and was okay. But all kinds of stuff happens. I sat with a woman one time, and we shared knowledge and stuff for a couple of hours. and she was seeing all kinds of stuff. And then it was really, really late. She said, "You might as well sleep here. You can sleep on the couch." I'm like, "All right then." So I was trying to go to sleep, and my guides are like, "She's going to come down in the morning. She's just going to scream at you and yell at you and everything." I'm like, "Why? I didn't do anything." I'm like, damn, I hate when people get mad at me. It pisses me right off, and I don't want anything to do with them. And they're like, "You'll know in the morning." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, you guys did something again." And like, they do stuff. So I'm laying there, and I could hear her, and sure enough, she stayed up all night. And I got a little bit of sleep. I'm like, shit, I should have just left. But sure enough, about 6 in the morning, she comes pounding and stomping down. Boom, 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 boom. And she's stomping. She wants to make sure I know she's awake because buses are starting. You can hear them going by. And so I'm like, sit up, and I'm sitting there and I'm waiting. So she comes down, she goes and makes a pot of coffee. She's not saying anything. And she's just angry. And I'm like, okay, she's going to rip my head off. Or she's going to throw something at me because she's in the kitchen. And I'm like, looking like, oh man, I better get ready to protect myself in case she loses it. And then she brings coffee and she puts it down, and then she just unleashes on me. She's like, "What the hell were you doing last night? Were you messing with my mind?" And she was just going on and on and on, and she was screaming, just raging. And I'm sitting there quietly, and I got my coffee, and I'm staring at her, just calmly drinking this coffee. And she's going right insane. And then she accuses me of all kinds of stuff and that. And I'm just staring at her. I'm like, whoa, I think this friendship's over. And she experienced for certain energies these beings made her experience. And she was like, yeah, you were like trying to do stuff to my mind. And she said your face kept changing. She said, I'd see you this, and then it would change, and then it would be another one, and then this, and then that. And you just kept doing that all night. And every time you talked about subjects, you would become something different. And she was freaked out of her mind. And I'm like, when the universe does things, like I say, I'm not in control. Things go on. And you can't steal this. You can't mess with it. People try to unzip me, open me up, try to look around. All they do is curse and harm me when they do that. And I go around Reiki masters, and they just want to rip me right apart. I go around these New Age people who say they're ancient souls and gurus, and they try to rip me right apart. And I'm like, all you're doing is cursing me, harming me, because when you tear somebody's energy open, anything that's negative around goes in them. And you never have a right to do that. You wouldn't want anybody to do it to you. I don't care where you're on the earth, you don't do this. No, we're not friends. She told me never ever come and bother again, so I'm like, okay, I moved on. She spun out in her mind. Like I say, it was for a reason. But one day the universe will help me understand why. But it was an interesting experience. This plan of borrowing a suitable body is always adopted by the great ones when they think it well to descend among men under conditions such as those which now obtained in the world. The Lord Gautama employed it when he came to attain the Buddhahood. The Lord Maitreya took the same course when he visited Palestine 2,000 years ago. The only exception known to me is that when the new Bohavista assumes the office of world teacher after his predecessor has become the Buddha, on his first appearance in the world in the capacity he takes birth as a little child in the ordinary way. Thus did our Lord, the present Bohavista, when he took birth as Sri Krishna on the glowing plains of India, to be revered, to be reverenced and loved with a passion of devotion that has scarcely ever been equaled. And this is where there's reasons. And this is where if you're a hollow bone, things like this go on. If you're a real, true servant and you're not full of shit, you don't question it. and I work with many, many different angels and spirits and guides. And when I'm doing something and they come in, this is what goes on. And I'm like, I don't command them. I don't try to order them around. I want to be a servant of the light. I want to be a master. I want to be an ancient soul. But I have to be obedient to them. So even when they put me in the worst shit place, worst sewer system, I have to stay there and live until it's over and move on. And all my life, I've been put in all kinds of shit, all kinds of insanity. This temporary occupation of the pupil's body should not be confused with the permanent use by any advanced person of a vehicle prepared for him by someone else. It is generally known among her followers that our great founder, Madame Blavatsky, when she left the body in which we knew her, entered another which had just been abandoned by its ordinary tenant. And this is where Lab Singh Rampa did the same thing, and I have his books, and I may read them, and there's about 20 of them, and there's really, really amazing stories. And he grew up as a little Tibetan boy, and he became part of the monastery, and at, I think it was like 7 years old or something, he had an astrology reading that told everything about his life. Hey, Hansia, I think that's the way you say it, Hancyka. And so Lab Singh Rampa, he did the same thing. He moved his soul from his Tibetan body into an Englishman. And Blavatsky, when she died here, because Cindy was talking about her, says, surprising she left at 50. But here it's talking about how she left the body and moved her soul into this other one. And they do this sometimes. And this is where they call walk-ins. And some people know about walk-ins and they think it's some sort of evil possession or something. No, it's a contract with the universe. And there's a lot of these kinds of things that go on the planet. And a person, the spirit comes in and all of a sudden they become all kinds of things and they have no memories of their family, of growing up, friends or anything. And they've had a really terrible accident and the soul leaves and these higher beings come in and take over that body. Sometimes they're all smashed up and they heal the body and everything. So it's really interesting. And don't try to tell people about this if you don't understand it. Don't get all spun out and crazy about it. People think possession, think all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, stop. You have no idea. It's a universal law. And there's something there that is way more beyond what people want to understand. Be very careful of the teachers you listen to. It is generally known among her followers that our great founder, Madame Blavatsky, when she left the body in which she knew her, entered another which had just been abandoned by its original tenant. As to whether that body had been specially prepared for her use, I have no information. But other instances are known in which that was done. There is always in such a case a certain difficulty in adapting the vehicle to the needs of the idiocracy of the new occupant. And it is probably that it never becomes a perfect fitting garment. There is for the incoming ego a choice between devoting a considerable amount of time and trouble to superintending the growth of the new vehicle, which would be a perfect expression of him as far as it is possible on the physical plane, or of avoiding all that difficulty by entering the body of another, a process which will provide a reasonably good instrument for all ordinary purposes, but it will never fulfill in every respect all that its owner desires. In all cases, a pupil is naturally eager to have the honor of giving up his body to his master, but few indeed are the vehicles pure enough to be so used. Question is often raised as to why an adept whose work seems to lie almost entirely on higher planes needs a physical body at all. It is really no concern of ours. But if speculation on such a matter be not irreverent, various reasons suggest themselves. The adept spends much of his time in projecting streams of influence, and while, so far as has been observed, these are most often on the higher mental levels or on the plane above that, it is probable that they may sometimes at least be etheric currents, and for the manipulation of these, the possession of a physical body is undoubtedly an advantage. Again, most of the masters who I've seen have few pupils or assistants who live with or near them on the physical plane, and a physical body may be necessary for their sake. Of this we may be certain, and if an adept chooses to take the trouble to maintain such a body, he has a good reason for it, for we know enough of their methods to work with to be fully aware. They always do everything in the best way and by the means which involves the least expenditure of energy. And so this next part is the Pupils chapter 3. Chapter 2, it says chapter 3, the entrance to the path. So this is where it starts helping you to understand the processes. And as I go along, hopefully it'll make more and more sense about a lot of different things. So, the way of the masters. There has always been a brotherhood of adepts and Great White Brotherhood. There have always been those who knew, those who possessed an inner wisdom. Our masters are among the present representation of that mighty line of seers and sages. Part of the knowledge which they have garnered during countless eons is available to everyone on the physical plane under the name of theosophy. But there is far more behind. The Master Kuthumi himself once said smilingly, when someone spoke of the erroneous changes that the theosophical knowledge had made in our lives, and of the wonderful comprehensiveness of the doctrines of reincarnation, yes, but we have lifted only a very small corner of the veil as yet. When we have thoroughly assimilated the knowledge given us and are all living up to its teachings, the Brotherhood will be ready to lift the veil further, but only when we have complied with those conditions. For those who wish to know more and to draw near, the path is open, but the man who aspires to approach the Master can reach them only by making himself unselfish, as they are unselfish, by learning to forget the personal self, and by devoting himself wholly to the service of humanity as they do. Inner article on occultism versus the occult art. Madame Blavatsky has expressed this necessity in characteristically vigorous language. And I have, I think, all of the Blavatsky books. There's a lot of them. Oh, Denny Jackson, you saw a beautiful red tail yesterday? Cool. You too, Wushu, you're seeing hawks. Yeah, I think people are becoming way more aware and Spirit's trying to find ways to give you answers and things. True occultism or theosophy is the great renunciation of self unconditionally and absolutely in thought as in action. It is altruism, and it throws him who practice it out of the calculation of the ranks of the living altogether. So you won't fit in, is what it's trying to say. It's like, I don't fit in. And the more you do this, the more you're going to not fit in. It's like even your family, everybody will turn on you. The more your light gets bright, the more you understand and allow and become a part of this. And you got to stop crying and pretending and trying to find friends. You'll attract the right people. But people want to go around and try to force everybody to like them and everything like that. And it's not the way it works. And the more and more and more you want to attract your soul family. And you got to stop crying that you're alone and you're lonely and all kinds of stuff. You got to quit it. It is altruism, and it throws him who practices out of the calculation of the ranks of the living altogether, not for himself, but for the world he lives. As soon as he has pledged himself to work, much is forgiven during the first years of probation, but no sooner is he accepted than his personality must disappear. He has to become a mere beneficent force in nature. It is only when the power of the passion is dead altogether, and when they have crushed and annihilated in the retort of an unflinching will, when not only all lusts and longings of the flesh are dead, but also the recognition of the personal self is killed out and the astral has been reduced in consequence to a cipher, the union with the higher self can take place, and that's where your higher self will come down in you. But all of these things have to be over. It's like, oh, I gotta have my wine. I gotta sit there, be really pretty with my little goblet of wine, telling everybody what angels are as I sip so prettily. Like, that is of the flesh. And it's like wanting to dress up and look like a guru. It's wanting to do all kinds of stuff. And like, that doesn't work. If you really want to be in the fifth dimension, all of that crap, all the sexual desires, all the different things. And this is where people have to decide to release that. And this is where I'm very truthful. And some people don't like it. I don't care. I gave up drugs and booze over 34 years ago, and I'm happy for what I did. It was my choice. Nobody made me do it. And I decided to follow this path, and I decided to put myself through really, really difficult, hard things with all the challenges in my life. I just kept going. And you have to do this. And these people that pretend to be wannabe yogi masters, they're so sexually in their base chakra, they'll never become master yogis. And they're trying to make you wake up your sleeping dragon, pump your energy. They want you to get into tantra and all kinds of stuff. And all you're doing is abusing energy. And you're just living in your base chakra. The second brain that is down there in the base chakra is more powerful than this one up here. And it's only stimulation. And this is where you got to understand what is your choices. No one's going to make you change it. I had to make all of my own changes. Every day I do that. Every day I decide what I need to do. Every day Cindy decides what she needs to do. And we sort of move forwards. I'm reading all of this, trying to give you answers and help you, but you'll make the decision. I'm not telling you what to do, and neither are these masters and beings. And this is where it's going to cut through all the bullshit. And if you want to go and find teachers that tell you to get rid of your ego and that, then stay there. Or go, oh, I don't believe what you're teaching me. I'm going to find somebody that really is teaching me the truth and helping me to grow. It is only when the power of the passion is dead altogether and when they have been crushed and annihilated in the retort of an unflinching will, when not only all the lusts and the longings of the flesh are dead, but also the recognition of the personal self is killed out, and the astral has been reduced to the consequence of a cipher, and that's CIPHER, that the union of the higher self can take place. Then when the astral reflects only the conquered man, and still living, but no more and longing selfish personalities, then the brilliant Augeoides, AUGOEIDES, the divine self, can vibrate in conscious harmony with both the poles of humanity, the human entity, the man of matter purified and ever pure spirit soul, and stand in the presence of the master self, the Christos, the mystic Gnostic, blended, merged into the one with it forever. The aspirant has a choice absolutely between life of the world and life of the occultism. And that's where paganism and occultism are really important. And occultism is practicing something that's separate of the world. And there's going to be more occult things coming in. But when we go into the future, we're all going to learn to practice the right things and we're going to get rid of the garbage. Occultism is not evil, but there are cults that practice very negative things. And there's occults that practice very beautiful, loving things. The aspirant has to choose absolutely between the life of the world and the life of occultism. It is useless and vain to endeavor to unite the two, for no man can serve two masters and satisfy both. That's why you have to choose. You have to believe. You have to practice. The point of view of the master is so radically different from ours that is difficult to at first for us to grasp it. They have their private affections just as we have, and assuredly they love some men more than others, but they will never allow such feelings as those to influence their nature in very slightest degree when the work is in question. They will take each trouble over a man if they see him in the seeds of future greatness. If they think that he will prove a good investment for the amount of time and force spent upon him, there is no such possibilities as the faintest thought of favoritism in the minds of the great ones. That's where I'm like that. I don't favor anybody. I will help you, and I'll try my best. But if you choose to try to insult me and mock me and do all kinds of things, I'll close the door at some point. I'm very patient. I spent years trying to help people. That's why I like telling stories about the hubcap master. I love manifesting. I spent 15 years trying to help this guy, and he just wouldn't listen. One day he had a heart attack, and that was it. And I shut it off. I told him, look, don't call me anymore. Don't bother with me anymore. I'm finished with you. And it was about a year and a half after, and he just fell over dead. But I tried for 15 years to help him. They will take much trouble over a man, so this is where they will see all the things that are going on in your life, and they could see who you are in the future. That's why we call on Saint Germain and all these beings. They will come in and look at everything, and they'll see where you will be in the future, and they will spend a lot of patient time trying to help you to connect with the right things, people, everything, so you can grow and evolve, so you can actually be in the fifth dimension. You're not going to sit around and go, oh, I was in the fifth dimension. Wasn't it? Did you see me disappear? That was so cool. I was in the fifth dimension. You guys all want to do that with me? Why? Why be so foolish? Why go to singing bowls for hours and hours, having somebody you don't know turn these bowls and do all kinds of stuff and give you all kinds of different things? For what? So you can waste your time and run around? Like, pull it out of here and wake up. They will take much trouble over man if they see him in the seed of future greatness. If they think that he will prove a good investment for the amount of time and force spent upon him, there is no such possibilities as the faintest thought of favoritism in the minds of the great ones. They consider simply and solely the work which has to be done, the work of evolution, the value of man in relation to it, and if we will fit ourselves to take part in that, our progress will be rapid. And for you people, this is your opportunity. You can go on doing the same things, or you can decide, I want something different. And there are spirit teachers. Stop just having Archangel Michael standing there all day with a flaming sword. Stop wearing mirrors and protection and all kinds of stuff, because you can't learn and grow doing that. If somebody's meant to kick you in the ass, go over, bend over and say, kick me in the ass. Get it over with. If somebody's meant to go and slap you in the face, then go over there and get slapped in the face and be done with it. Stop running away like cowards. Like I say, I've taken beatings, abuse, every kind of thing in my life. And wherever there's challenges, I go and I just carry on doing things. They will take much trouble over man if they see in him the seeds of future greatness. And I know I've connected with people in the future. They will do great things. And they are connected to magical stuff they don't know yet. If they think that he will prove a good investment for the amount of time and force spent upon him, there is no such possibility as the faintest thought of the favoritism in the minds of the great ones. They consider simply and solely the work which has to be done, the work of evolution, the value of the man in relation to it, and if we will fit ourselves to take part in that, our progress will be rapid. And it says the magnitude of the task. Few people realize the magnitude of undertaking and therefore the seriousness of what they are asking when they want to be taken as pupils. So when people come into my life, they don't realize. Like, I will allow you to go through anything and everything. I won't try to save you and heal you. I'll teach you. I'll do what I can, but you got to figure it out. I'll give you all kinds of information and I'll watch you. The Adepts are dealing with the entire world in enormous comprehensive sweeps of power. They are influencing millions in their causal bodies or on the bodaic or buddhic plane all of the time, steadily, though by almost imperceptible degrees, raising the higher bodies of the people on a wholesale scale. And yet the same masters who spends his life in doing that work will sometimes turn aside and pay personal attention to little details connected with one pupil. All who dare to ask to become pupils shall try to realize the stupendous character of the forces and the work, the magnitude of the being with whom they're proposed to come in contact with. That's why you got to figure out who is your teacher, because there's many teachers. And you got to understand, because somewhere you'll see, you will know. And it'll be very beneficial to understand it. That's why I want to read this to you, because I feel it's going to help some of you. The least understandings of the greatness of all of these things will make it clear why the Adepts will not spend some of their energy on a pupil unless they have evidence that in a reasonable time he will add to the support of the world a strong current of strength and power in the right direction. They live to do the work of the logos of the system, and those of us who wish to draw near to them must learn to do likewise and live only for the work. Those who do that will certainly attract the attention of the holy ones and be trained by them to help and bless the world. And this is what a lot of us are here to do. A lot of us have abilities in that, but some of us, we play all kinds of silly games instead of doing what is right. Lots of people want to pretend to be gurus and all kinds of stuff. I like being just Joe. They live to do the work of the Logos system, and those of us who wish to draw near to them must learn to do likewise and live only for the work. Those who do that will certainly attract the attention of the holy ones and be trained by them to help and bless the world. That's very powerful to remember. Human progress is slow, but it is constant. Therefore, the number of the perfected man is increasing, and the possibility of attaining to their level is within the reach of all who are willing to make the stupendous effort acquired. In normal times, we should need many births before we could again gain adeptship. But just now, it is possible for us to hasten the progress on our path. And right now, man, you can move through this stuff like crazy. Some people are meant to be in the fifth dimension and they need to want to call in their teachers and everything and start understanding and moving through all of this. I show up trying to help people. They shut the door in my face. The adeptship, but just now it is possible for us to hasten our progress on the path to compress into a few lives the evolution which otherwise would take many thousands of years. And you don't want to go back on the wheel of karma and wait many, many thousands of years before you can do this again. And some people are meant to, others won't. That is the effort which is being made by many members of the Theosophical Society. For there is in this society an inner school which teaches man how to prepare themselves more rapidly for this higher work. That preparation needs great self-control, determined effort carried on year after year, and often with but little to show outwardly in a way of definite progress. For it involves the training of the higher body far more than the physical body, and the training of the higher does not always manifest itself very obviously on the physical plane. The importance of the work. Anyone who hears about a master and their teachings, if he has any grasp at all of what it means and involves, must instantly be seized with the most intense desire to understand them and enter their service. The more he learns, the more does he become filled with the wonders and the beauty and the glory of God's plan. The more anxious does he become to take part in the work. Once he has realized that God has a plan of evolution, he wants to be a fellow laborer with God, and nothing else can possibly bring satisfaction. And that's the way I am. I've been driven in this since I was a very, very small boy. And I've never ever stopped. I don't care what goes on this planet. I just keep going. And I'm trying to find all these answers. So if I can find them in some way, I can help others in the world do the same. Then he begins to ask himself a question. What must I do next? The answer is work. Do what you can to help the progress of humanity in the Master's way. Begin with what you have the opportunity to do and what you can do, which may be any little external thing at first. And presently, as you acquire the necessary qualities of character, you will be drawn into a higher side of it all, until through striving to be and do your best, you will find yourself possessed of the qualifications which admit to initiation and membership of the Great White Brotherhood itself. When first I had the privilege of coming into somewhat closer touch with the Master, I asked him in a letter what I should do. He answered the following effect. You must find work for yourself. You know what you are doing. So this is where I try to find work for myself. And I try to do things. I try to teach everywhere I go. I try to help and teach. When I first had the privilege of coming into somewhat closer touch with the Master, I asked him in a letter what I should do. He answered to the following effect. You must find work for yourself. You know what you are doing. Throw yourself into our work in any way you can. And that's where I tell Cindy. She's meant to teach. But she always wants to know. I'm like, just do the work. Don't worry about it. If I give you a definite piece of work to do, you would do it. But in that case, the karma of what was done would be mine, because I told you what to do. And that's why I don't tell people what to do. I'll find all kinds of ways to teach and help you. But if you ask me what to do, I'm not going to tell you. This is called The Masters and the Path by Charles W. Leadbeater. And I don't try to even tell Cindy what to do. I'll put all kinds of things in front of her. I'll let her choose. But I'm not going to tell her what to do. And I don't want people's karma. And a lot of people will come to me and try to trick me into telling them things. I won't do that. You would have only karma of willing obedience, which of course is very good, but it is not the karma initiating a fruitful line of action. I want you to initiate work for yourself, because then the karma of the good deed will come to you. And many people are being asked to do stuff by the universe. They won't do it. They're being asked to go places and all kinds of stuff. They won't do any of it. And they just mock the universe, try to boss it around, try to say and do all kinds of stuff. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Like I say, I'm obedient. I go where I'm asked to go. I go and do what I'm told to do. I go and sit in the shit pile until they tell me, wipe it off and move on now. The ancient rules, the qualification for admission to the Great White Brotherhood, which have to be acquired in the course of the work in the earlier part of the path, are of very definite character and are always essential and the same, although they have been described in many different terms during the last 25 centuries. In the early days of the Theosophical Society, when all its wonderful teachings was new to us, this question of qualifications was naturally one of those by which some of us were so much eager to learn. And before Madame Blavatsky wrote down for us that most marvelous manual, The Voice of the Silence, she had already given us 2 lists of requirements for cellaship. CHELASHIP, cellaship. I cannot do better than quote them here for comparisons with the latter direction she writes. A chela is a person who has offered himself to a master as a pupil to learn particularly the hidden mysteries of nature and the physical powers latent in man. The master who accepts him is called in India a guru. A real guru is always an adept in occult sciences, a man of profound knowledge, esoteric and esoteric. So exoteric and esoteric, especially the latter, and one who has brought his carnal nature under the subjugation of the will, who has developed in himself both the power, the sati, to control the forces of nature, and the capacity to probe her secrets by the help of formerly latent but now active powers of his being. This is the real guru. To offer oneself as a candidate for cellaship is easy enough. To develop into an adept is most difficult task any man could possibly undertake. There are sources of naturally born poets, mathematicians, mechanics, statesmen, etc. But a natural born adept is something practically impossible. For though we do hear at very rare intervals of one who has an extraordinary innate capacity for the acquisition of occult knowledge and power, and this is where Krishna Marudi was supposed to be one of these, yet even he has to pass the same tests and probation and grow through the self-same training as any less endowed fellow aspirant. In this matter, it is most true that there is no royal road by which favorites may travel, and there is no. If people want to be around me, I won't treat you as a favorite. I'll treat you as a friend. I'll treat you and try to help you, but I won't go around and make one person special over another. I don't like when people think and try to do that. People used to get really mad at me when I would go and help people and go to different meditation groups and that in Edmonton, and when I was in Hinton and other places, I would go all over doing things, and people would get really mad at me because they thought they were special and this and that. Like the hubcap master used to get really mad at me when I would go and do all kinds of things with other people. I'm like, you don't own me. I have to go and help people, and I have to teach and do stuff. And people think they control me like some little pet dog. I'm not on a leash. I'm here as a free soul trying to do lots for this planet. A man of profound knowledge, oh, way past that. There are scores of natural born poets, mathematicians, and mechanics, statements, etc. Natural born adepts is something particularly impossible for those who do hear at very rare intervals the one who has an extraordinary innate capacity. For the acquisition of occult knowledge and power, yet even he has to pass the self-same tests of probation and go through the same training as any less endowed fellow aspirant. In this matter, it is most true that there is no royal road by which favorites may travel. For centuries, a selection of chelas outside the hereditary group within the Gonpa temple has been made by the Himalayan Mahatmas themselves from among the classes. In Tibet, a considerable number of natural mystics. The only exceptions have been in the cases of Western man like Flood, Thomas Vaughan, Parsilius, Pico de Mirambulo, Count Saint Germain, whose temperamental affinity to this celestial science more or less forced the distant adept to come into a personal relationship with them, enable them to get such small or large proportions of the whole truth as was possible under the social surroundings. From the book 1V, the Kitu, the KIU/TE, that's book 1V, book 4, chapter on the laws of the Upanishads. So the Upanishads, we learn that the qualifications expected in the chelas were 1. Perfect physical health, 2. Absolute mental and physical purity, 3. 3. Unselfishness of purpose, universal charity, piety for all animate beings, 4. Truthfulness and unserving faith in the law of karma, independent of intervention of any power in nature, a law whose course is not to be obstructed by any agency, not to be caused to deviate by prayer or propitiatory exoteric ceremonies. So it's propitiatory, esoteric ceremonies. 5. Courage undaunted in every emergency, even by peril of life. And that's where lots of people, they get put through really, really challenging things. I've gone through those. 6. An initial perception of one's being the vehicle of the manifestations of Avalokiteshvara, a divine Atman spirit. So Avalkiteshvara. 7th, calm indifference for but just appreciation of everything that constitutes the objectivity and transitory world in its relation with and to the invisible regions. Let's see how long this is. Okay, when this one I get to the end, I'm gonna stop, but I'll sit for just a little bit to talk, and then me and Cindy have things to do. Such at the least must have been the recommendation of one aspiring to perfecting celliship. So you had to really, really work hard at all of these 7 to gain and go up in these ways. But now we can move past that and do all kinds of really amazing things. With the sole expectation of the first, which are rare and exceptional cases might have been modified, each one of these points has been invariably insisted upon. All must have been more or less developed in the inner nature of the chella's unhelped exhortation before he can be actually put to the test. When the self-evolving aesthetic, whether in or outside the active world, has placed himself according to his natural capacity above and hence made himself master of his Sharia, Sharira body, Indriya, Indriya senses, dosha faults, dosha faults, dukkha, dukkha. So start over. Dukkha, pain, and is ready to become one with his mana, mind, his Buddha, intellectual, and his spirit intelligence, the Atma, highest soul, spirit. When he is ready for this and further to recognize in Atma the highest ruler in the world of perception, and in the will the highest executive energy power, then may he under the time honored rules be taken in hand by one of the initiates. He may then be shown the mystery paths to whose farther ends is obtained the unerring discernment of the phala, Phala, or the fruits of cause produced, and given the means of reaching apavarga, Apavarga, emancipation from the misery of repeated births. Prabhava, so Pretyabhava, in those determinations of ignorant has no hand. So 5 years of Theosophy, and it says second edition, page 31/2. So it explains in that one a bunch of stuff. The second set of rules for which he gives us occurs in the book of Practical Occultism. I have that book too. There are 12 in number, but she tells us that they are taken from a list of 73. To enumerate which would be useless, as they would be meaningless in Europe, though she says that every instructor in the East is furnished with them. The explanation in brackets are by Madame Blavatsky herself. They are as follows. The place selected for receiving instructions must be a spot calculated not to distract the mind and find the influence evolving magnetic object. The 5 sacred colors gathered in the circle must be there among other things. The place must be free from the malignment influences hanging about in the air. The place must be set apart and used for no other purpose. So it's like having a meditation room where you would pray and you would be in this place. So misaligned influences hanging about in the air, because there's all kinds of things that try to come in. So you have to have a place where you have like an altar or something where you do things. The place selected for receiving instruction must be a spot calculated not to distract the mind and filled with influences evolving magnetic objects. The 5 sacred colors gathered in a circle must be there among other things. The place must be free from the maligned influences hanging about in the air. The place must be set apart and used for no other purpose. The 5 sacred colors are the prismatic hues arranged in a certain way, as these colors are very magnetic. The maligned influences are meant any disturbances through strife, quarrels, bad feelings, etc., as these are said to impress themselves immediately on the astral light in the atmosphere of the place and to hang about in the air. The first condition seems easy enough to accomplish, yet on further consideration it is one of the most difficult to obtain. So this is where it's like a spiritual room. Before the disciple shall be permitted to study face to face, he has to acquire primarily understanding in a select company of other lay upasaka, upasaka disciplines, the number of whom must be odd. Face to face means in this instance a study independent or apart from others when the disciple gets his instruction face to face either but with himself, his higher divine self, or his guru. It is then only that each receives his due information according to the use of he has made of his knowledge. This can happen only towards the end of the cycle of instruction, before though the teacher shall impart to the Lano disciple the good holy word of Lamrin, or shall permit him to make ready the Dujid, Dudjed, thou shalt not take care that his mind is thoroughly purified and at peace with all, especially with his other selves. Otherwise, the word of wisdom and the good law shall scatter and be picked up by the winds. And that's where people want to know things. Sometimes they're not meant. That's where in the Bible says, don't give pearls to swine. Lamrin is a work of practical instruction that's the Tson Ka Pa, Tsonkhapa, in two portions, one of the aesthetic classical and an esoteric purpose, the other for esoteric use. To make ready the Dujit is to prepare the vessel used for the seership, such as a mirror or crystal. The other self refers to the fellow student. Unless the greatest harmony reigns among the learner, no session is possible. It is the teacher who makes the selection according to the magnetic and electric nature of the student, bringing together the adjusting most carefully with positive and negative elements. The upasak, while studying, must take care to be united with the fingers on one hand. So they probably do the mudras, different mudras with their hands. Thou shalt impress upon their mind that whatever hurts one shall hurt the other, and if rejoicing to find one finds an echo in the breast of the other, then required conditions are absent and is useless to proceed. This can hardly happen if the primary choice made was consistent with the magnetic requirements. It is known to cellas otherwise promising and fit for the reception of truth had to wait for years on the account of their temporary and impossibility they felt to put themselves in tune with their companions forward. The discipleship must be tuned by the guru as the string of a lute, each different from the other, yet each emanating sound in harmony with all. Collectively, they must form a keyboard answering in all parts to thy lightest touch, the touch of the master. Thus their mind shall open to the harmonious harmonies of wisdom, to vibrate as knowledge through each other, resulting in effects pleasing to the presiding gods, tutelary patronage of angels, and useful to Lano. And this is where I want to get a group together, and I want to be able to try to bring that together, but I won't do it unless the universe gives me permission. And I spent years trying to find people to create the right kind of meditation group to bring up to connect everybody this way, but most people they don't really want to do these kinds of things. You're welcome, Pam Rader. I'm glad you showed up in our lives, me and Cindy, and you've helped us a lot, and I'm glad I'm able to help you. Cindy read this book also, The Masters and the Path. And like I say, there's a lot of things she's doing she doesn't quite understand yet, but in a few years, it's all going to come together and she'll see the puzzle, and people will really see and know who she is, and she's going to do a lot of things. So I'm going to get to the end of this, and then I'll tell you what we're going to be reading tomorrow. And if you want to come on tomorrow and hear more about this, then join me at 10 o'clock and I'll read and see if I can help you understand more. So Lano is just a disciple, as a dreaded external living influence along the magnetic emanations from living creatures. For this reason, while at one with all his inner nature, he must take care to separate his outer external body from every foreign influence. One must drink out of or eat in his cup, but himself. He must avoid bodily contact, being touched or touch with humans as with animal beings. And this is where, like I say, the more higher you go, like Buddhists, real yogis, they don't allow you to touch them. Very often they will touch anybody. And they stay in a lot of seclusion because you absorb and you transfer energies. And people in a new age, they all want to hug. Oh, heart to heart. Oh, this and that. And I'm like, really? It's every so often I'll hug people, not very often. And there's a reason for that. And like I say, you got to understand this and you got to learn how to accept as you go higher in this awareness. You stop practicing and doing all kinds of things because you're trying to go up here and your master's trying to teach you, then you're contaminating yourself. There's people who are really into really dark negative things and they want you to hug them because they know they're going to switch energy with you. And they'll try to come around and it will really, really affect you. It takes a long time to clean your energy and bring it back up. And like I say, in the Chinese and some of these other practices, even in Tibetan Buddhism, they don't do a lot of hugging. In a lot of yogic places, after they've done yoga and that, they do not hug. They don't touch one another. None can feel different between himself and his fellow students, such communities, that my brother, etc., and remain as a upasaka. His thoughts must be predominantly fixed upon his heart, chasing therefrom every hostile thought to any living being. It, the heart, must be full of feeling of its non-separateness from the rest of the beings, as from all in nature, otherwise no success can follow. The disciple has to dread external living influences alone, magnetic emanations from living creatures. For this reason, while at one with all his inner nature, he must take care to separate his outer external body from every foreign influence. None must drink out of or eat in the cup but himself. He must avoid bodily contact, being touched or touch with humans as with animal beings. That's why in natives with ceremonies and that, we don't have animals. Like, animals are not accepted. And in natives, in native culture, we know animals will absorb and pull energy from people. They really, really like it because animals are meant to live outdoors in nature where they get all their energy. And when they live in, they want constantly for people to touch them because they're sucking your energy. And when you're doing spiritual things, they'll come and they will suck everything out of everybody. And they know this. And this is why when we have ceremonies, natives, we have no animals and things around. It's not allowed. And people always say, oh yeah, I love my dog. Who cares? Go ahead and love your dog. It's okay to love animals and everything, but my granddad always told me, animals don't belong in a house. And I don't want dogs. I don't want dogs living in my house. I don't want cats in my house. I don't want all kinds of things in my house. Because God gave them the home and it was outside. And they were designed to live outside. Like in the Arctic when I was a little boy, my granddad's dogs all lived outside. Even if it was 80 below, they were never affected. And they loved being outdoors. And they would be fed and taken care of really, really good. And my granddad loved them and they loved working for him. But they would never come in the house. And they had their own little home. They had everything. And they were very, very happy. But we have taken animals out of their environment and we've altered them. I see people feeding their animals vegetables and their animals are getting cancer and sick and everything. I'm like, that animal is supposed to eat meat, fish, and other things in nature. That's what he did. But all these vegans and vegetarians is, oh, I'm a vegan vegetarian. So they force their animal to do this. And I see animals with big growths and all kinds of bad things. And I'm like, they're not meant to be neutered and all kinds of stuff, but we do all these bad things to animals and we say we love them. Got to really, really think up here. No pets are permitted, and it is forbidden even to touch certain trees and plants. A disciple has to live, to say, in his own atmosphere in order to individualize it to occult purposes. The mind must remain blunt at all, but the universe truth is in nature, lest the doctrines of the heart should become only the doctrines of the eyes, empty esoteric ritualism. No animal food or whatever kind, nothing that has life in it, should be taken by a disciple. No wine, no spirit, no opium should be used, for these are like the evil spirits who fasten upon the unwary. They devour the understanding, so they devour. That's why alcohol, it eats your soul. It destroys your liver, your brain, and everything. It eats you. That's why Muslims don't drink. That's why there's lots of cultures in Europe. They have nothing to do with alcohol because they knew what it did. Wine and spirits are supposed to contain and preserve the bad magnetism of all the men who helped in their fabrication, the meat of each animal to preserve the psychic characteristics of its kind. Meditation, abstinence of all, the observation of moral duties, gentle thoughts, good deeds, kind words, and goodwill to all, and enter oblivion of self, are most efficacious means of obtaining knowledge and preparing for the reception of the higher wisdom. It is only by virtue of the strict observance of the foregoing rules that the disciple can hope to acquire a good time, the siddhas and the arhats, and the growth which makes him become gradually one with universal all. And that's where there's laws and things when you do stuff, and you have to respect that. But we have now a dispensation where we can move through these kinds of things and we'll be forgiven for a lot of things, but we can get into the fourth and fifth dimension. But we got to release this 3D stuff. The first set of rules call for no comment, as they are evidently the universal application and differ only in the forms of their expression from those which have been given in later books. The second set is obviously on a very different footing. It is clearly formulated for Eastern students, and even among them chiefly for those who are able to devote their whole life to their study and to live secluded from the world in a monastery or a cult community. And that's what people are not doing. Wherever they go, they're having really lots of challenges. But if you're meant to live this way, you'll find a monastery or a cult community. The mere fact that there are 61 other rules which would be meaningless to European pupils show that they are neither intended for all nor necessary for progress along the path. That's why people say, oh, you shouldn't eat meat. I'm like, you can't tell a person what to do. And I always tell people I'm a carnivore. The mere fact that there are 61 rules which would be meaningless to European pupils show they are neither intended for all nor necessary for progress along the path, since many have trodden that path without knowing them. They are nevertheless great interest and value as recommendations. The moral and ethical regulations are familiar to us, and so is the instance upon the necessity of perfect harmony and mutual understandings among those disciples who have to learn and work together. It is to this latter object that most of the rules here quoted are directed. In the case of a group of students, its importance can scarcely be exaggerated. In Western life, we have insisted so strongly upon individualism and upon the undoubted right of each person to live his own life so long as he does not incommode, incommode, incommode others. So I guess command or try to tell that we have a large extent forgotten the possibilities of really intimate union. Instead of being united as fingers of one hand, we live together as a number of marbles in a bag, which is far from ideal for the inner point of view. It must be supposed that their earnest exhortations to close commandership are inconsistent with Rule 8, in which the cella is instructed to avoid contact with others. This is not so, for the directions refer to entirely different matters. The suggestion that each should have his own cup, yes, his own plate, fork, knife, and spoon also, is most excellent, for our present scheme of the promiscuous use of half-washed cutlery and cookery is revolting to persons of taste. The avoidance of unnecessary contact with others has its advantages, for the discriminate mingling of auras is highly undesirable. So that's where your aura can get contaminated. That's where these higher beings, they don't just hang around places that are negative, because it really affects them, and it takes lots to clear out and heal and fix that. That's why a lot of people, like you go in a Buddhist temple, the Buddhist master teacher, like if you go to Kusho's temple, you stay outside his energy field. You go to old Lang For's, he's Thai. You go there, he's surrounded by Buddhist monks. They surround him so far out so nobody can get in his energy. You cannot touch him or anything. And he will come to you if he wants to. He will touch you, but he won't stay in your energy. And they don't hug. The avoidance of unnecessary contact with others has the advantage, for the discriminant mingling with auras is highly undesirable. In the leisurely Indian life of the old days, it was so easy to escape uncomfortable proximity. Now that trains and tramways have been introduced, and that the hurry of modern business compels people to use them, even in the immemorial East, is somewhat more difficult, and in Europe it would be particularly impossible. That is why a different method of dealing with this problem, or propinquity, is now offered to us. I remember when I first moved to Edmonton, I didn't have a vehicle, so I used to ride the train, and it used to be just packed, and I hated being in there. It felt so awful. But that's the only way, and it would be so packed. And when I went to school, I would ride the buses in the morning to go to school and get home, and it would be so packed, and you'd be pushed against people. When you get out of there, you just feel so awful. And I used to can't wait till I got a vehicle so I didn't have to do that anymore. We can readily and effectively protect ourselves against undesirable magnetism by forming around our body a shell, which will exclude it. Such a shell may be of etheric, astral, or mental matter according to the purpose for which it is required. A description of various kinds and the way to make them will be found in my book On the Hidden Side of Things, which also include the beautiful story of Alexander's monks, showing that there is another way of protecting oneself from evil influences, which even better than the formation of a shell, and that is by so filling one's heart with divine love, and it radiates perpetually in all directions in the shape of torrents of love for one's fellow man, so that they might stream acts of the most perfect of shields against the entrance of the current from without. The regulations against keeping pet animals left leaves out of account the fact that it is only through association with man that these creatures can be individualized. It appears to consider only that the possibility that man may allow himself to be adversely affected by the animal and to forget altogether the benefic influence which man may intentionally bring to bear upon his younger brother. But quite possibly in the remote ages in which these rules were formulated, there were no animals sufficiently developed to be approached individualizations. And this is where animals now want to evolve up. So this is where things are changing. In writing of the progress of the pupil, Madame Blavatsky advises strongly against marriage, maintaining that he cannot devote himself both to the occultist and to a wife. So for her not to marry. It occurred to one that if the wife shared his devotion to occultism, this rather severe strict scripture would no longer be applicable. While it is true that the bachelor is in certain ways freer, as for example, to throw up his business and to start off to take up work in some foreign country, which he could hardly do if he had the responsibility of a wife and family. It must never be forgotten that a married man has the opportunity of serving the cause in quite another way by providing suitable vehicles and favorable surroundings for the many advanced egos who are waiting to descend into incarnation. So you bring children into the world. And then you give them every opportunity to become masters. Both types of work are needed. There is no room among the ranks of the disciples for both married and single. We find no accommodations for the married state in any of the three great guidebooks, which are given to us to the light use on our way. The last and simple of these is Krishnamurti's wonderful book, At the Feet of the Master. So that's where I'm going to end today. And then it's going to talk about At the Feet of the Master tomorrow. And then the disciple's attitude, the master's work, making the link, none is overlooked, the responsibilities of the teacher. And this is where if you want to be a teacher, you have to really understand wrong ideas. And there's lots of wrong ideas. The effects of meditation, common hindrances, devotions must be complete. So if you're going to devote yourself and you're going to do this in your life, then it has to be complete. And that's where eventually you will give up everything. You will sacrifice. And you will choose this higher energy in life and everything, and you'll let go of everything.